Right, okay, so LinkedIn have not approved me for live broadcasts. This is a quick video which I want to do, which is a review of a book called Generation Rent. So I'm going to get my mug off the screen and we'll just go for the screen itself, which should be up there now. And here we have Generation Rent, why you can't buy a home or even rent a good one. Now, this is what the write-up of the book says. In modern Britain, paying rent to a private landlord is financially ruinous. It costs more than paying a mortgage, hobbles the ability to save, and puts you on the hook for endless monthly payments, often for shabby, dangerous, cramped flats. Yet, for millions, mostly under 35, renting privately is the only option. By 2025, more people are expected to rent than own their own homes. Members of today's Generation Rent who have done everything right, good education, good job, have been priced out of the property market for good. They are stuck. In this razor-sharp account of how a nation of homeowners gave way to a generation of renters, hemorrhaging cash, Chloe Timperley tackles the myths and mysteries belying so many attempts to fix Britain's broken housing market. She reveals who's been shafted, who's cashing in, and the radical steps we must take if we are to bury a rotten idea that hoarding rental properties is nothing more than a legitimate investment strategy. Let's start bringing Britons home. Right, so that's the publisher's blurb. We're going to have a look inside the book in a minute, but what I want to do is just show, this is my folder for the modular finance research on our product, which is the 25-35, that's rungs 25 to 35 of the housing ladder, 5% deposit and 5 times joint incomes mortgages. And what I've been doing is preparing a position paper for my mortgage consultants and the banking directors of our business, Moduloft. Moduloft is an affordable modular building construction method, and we are cutting out the middleman and forming our own mortgage company to provide mortgages which address the concerns in this book, which I'm about to review. Now, there are a couple of things mentioned in the book, first of which is the Barker Review. Now, I've just put the Barker Review into my research folder, and I should be reading this today. It's by Kate Barker in March 2004. Now, obviously, it was 2010 that the coalition government started in the UK. So we've had 10 years of first Cameron and Clegg, then Theresa May, and now Boris Johnson. And Robert Jenrick, the new minister for local government and housing, has produced another report, which is also here. If I can just find it. Where are we? First Homes, this is the one here. Now, this came out in February 2020. I haven't started looking around for what's been written on this yet. It is a fairly shortish document. So scope of the consultation, case for change, design, delivery about this consultation, and then an annex. So it's a fairly short document, and it's talking about affordability, building houses, etc. Now, there's been a whole raft of publicity surrounding Robert Jenrick and his proposed reforms to the planning system, etc. Now, just by way of a further bit of introduction, I just want to go to my LinkedIn page. I actually did do a post on all of the property professional groups, which I'm actually involved, in discussions on LinkedIn, and a few people have been looking at these things. But here is the post I did yesterday. So this is about the Generation Rent book, and I'm just about to go and flip through the look inside bit. Now, this is a great book, well worth a read. I bought it on Kindle and have also ordered a hard copy. Come on, all you fellow boomers, ask not what you can do for your pension fund, but what you can do for Generation Rent. And then Moduloft and Moduloft Finance, which are the two companies I just talked about. I want to say this is a wonderful book which gets the triple whammy of credit misallocation, planning imagination failure, and the nothing to see here House of Commons landlord problem. Open brackets, I'm all right, Jack, close brackets, attitude. Nothing is so difficult to explain as that which someone's pension fund depends on not understanding. Chloe accesses monetary reality, a key to a proper understanding of political economy and finance economics. I'm now hooked, a reader for life. Chloe writes in a sharp, concise and accessible way. If you haven't read this, then you should. And that is all about this. And I just read the publishing blurb on the Amazon site, but let's just take a look inside. So, Chloe Timperley, Generation Rent, why you can't buy a home or even rent a good one. Okay, and then the contents, if we just go down the headings, and as these headings come up, I'll just recall some of what I've been reading. So, buy a home, can't buy, won't buy, refusing to leave home, a short history of British homes, selling off council homes, boom, the impact of credit. Now, the impact of credit is absolutely key to this story, and that goes back to the early 1980s and big bang in the city, carpet bagging of building societies, shares, etc., and the common misapprehension or misunderstanding that banks loan deposits when they make loans. They don't. Building societies used to lend out depositors money, and that isn't how it's done largely anymore. There are still some people that lend out real skin in the game capital, but by and large, most financial institutions, particularly banks, when they lend, are not actually lending deposits. They're not intermediaries. And the Bank of England, which Chloe points out in the book, have made this quite plain, as have scholars such as Steve Keen, Michael Hudson, Josh Ryland Collins, and Professor Richard Werner. Now, Richard Werner's work, I think, for me personally, is the best work on this, along with a guy called Bernard Latier. Bernard died, I think it was last year, sadly, but he has written many books on money, and then there's one book which nobody ever mentions, which I've read, which is very good, called it's called The Money Syndrome by a German academic called Helmut Kreutz, and that book actually goes into a lot of work which Bernard and Margaret Kennedy have also built upon, talking about the interest element in purchasing, particularly things like public housing. If you're not in debt or don't think you're in debt, you'd be very surprised on reading The Money Syndrome quite how much the price, how much of the overall price of purchase you make has a component of actually carried interest. It's a very interesting insight into quite what the burden of debt and the interest on debt is to the modern economy. And that's a point which is often missed. So, say hello to the landlord and caught in the mortgage trap. Then section 2, help for buyers, bank of mum and dad. That's a brilliant observation that Chloe makes there. Bank of Mum and Dad is the largest mortgage lender in the UK, and obviously they are lending skin in the game money. And so actually arguably they're probably the largest real skin in the game lender. Official Help to Buy scheme, very interesting. Sharing a home, mortgage tenants, the home ownership dream sours. So it's a history and a timeline of putting some practical meat on the bones of the roots of where this problem stems from. How homes are built. Why can't we just build more new homes? Shipping containers, cheaper homes. Well, that's where we come in with Moduloft and offsite construction. Our own particular solution to that comes from AECOM and Roger Stirk Harpers and Partners, and a new building process which they have called Inno, which we'll be using for Moduloft. Selling planning permission, that's section 106s and community infrastructure levels, etc. Letting the local economy. So section 5, the nation of renters, helping out the landlords, the House of Landlords. That's obviously the House of Commons problem, which I allude to. Get out of my house, revenge evictions, the reality of renting, regulating the rental market. Right, with the community activists, I must read that one. I'm a big fan of a publication by Empty Homes, or at Empty Homes on Twitter, called Pretty Vacant, which is an excellent report, which has quite a lot of criticism, which Chloe also has in this book, of the buy to rent and affordable rental conditions as laid out by people such as Sadiq Khan. One of the things which I've got here to read is this consultation on intermediate housing by the Mayor of London. Basically Stalinist command and control types like Sadiq Khan, like Mayor Biggs in Tower Hamlets, do not have a clue about addressing the needs of real people, the aspirations of real people. In my opinion, they are unfit for purpose, and for all of their political correctness, they're othering and they're looking down their noses at and refusal to enable people to actually take control of their own situations with no strings attached solutions, as opposed to solutions where they remain in control of people's lives, because politically that's what that sort of mindset has. They're very paternalistic. They are the patriarchy. I mean, all you new feminists out there, if you want to know who the patriarchy is, look at those guys. They speak all your sort of buzzwords and all the rest of it, pay lip service. But you know, you need to be listening to Jane Greer and the Beastoff, the proper feminists that actually made strides in the 70s and the 80s. Own ground has been lost since then. You know, I'm a man, obviously. You know, I'm not a feminist. I believe in equality and all the rest of it, but I don't believe in favouring one group or the other. I had a long discussion with my ex-wife the other day about white privilege. You know, I'm a privileged white guy. You know, I fully admit that. But there are loads of white guys who aren't privileged. And my ex-wife was saying, "Well, that's the thing that you think that." And I said, "Well, actually, I can speak for myself, but I'm certainly not going to tar everybody else with the same brush, as it were." And one, acknowledging one's privilege then does not mean you can't make your own arguments and actually say, well, actually, there seems to be some inconsistencies, in fact, hypocrisies in what these other people are saying. So with Sadiq Khan, for instance, what should he check his parliamentary privilege? I mean, obviously he's not white. He can't check his white privilege because he's not white. But there's very little doubt that he's privileged, or even say, so Javid, who I liked, and Rishi Sunak. I mean, you know, they're privileged people. You know, they're not white. They're Pakistani. They're brown. Well, you know, I haven't got a problem with that. but certainly if I've got to check my privilege, they got to check theirs too, and they're not the only ones. You know, it's a ridiculous thing to say. It's a nonsensical, completely meaningless statement, in my opinion. I understand what people are getting at, and you know, institutionalized racism and all the rest of it. Yeah, I know that exists. I've seen it. You know, I've got black, brown, red, yellow. You know, I've got friends with creeds and bloody colours. But the fact is that some of them are privileged, some of them are not privileged, and all the rest of it. But what does checking white privilege mean? What does it even mean? Anyway, this is getting off point here, but let's just get back to this index. So, is anybody here a socialist? I think that's irrelevant. At the Landlord Advice Roadshow, Nest Egg property is a pension. Inside the buy-to-let industry, very important point that cash boxes in the sky, and various other interesting discussions I've had with Ranjan Balnakumaran on those sorts of things. Now for the crackdown. Don't like the word crackdown, Chloe. That sounds, you know, never mind your socialists. Let's have a Stalinist crackdown. Right. Some ways to make the system work. Time for a land value tax. Land value tax, very interesting point. Henry George. I like Georgism. I'm a bigger fan of distributism and Prudenism, but I haven't read that chapter yet, but look forward to doing so. So let's just have a little butcher's here. Shall we read the preface? Why not? Generation rent is ultimately the story of how the UK turned its youth into an asset class. Over the latter part of the 20th and early 21st centuries, housing went from being a basic good to a financial asset. As it did so, our homes went from being a store of wealth for occupiers to a store of wealth for landlords and speculators. This trend goes beyond the behaviour of buy-to-let investors and begins in popular imagination. Before we can restore justice and decency, we must change the culture view of our homes as personal trophies, pension pots, and money-making machines, rather than basic necessities for a normal life. Britain's housing crisis is a vast, sprawling, and multi-layered story. In order to make this book concise, some research and case studies had to be left out. I have tried to weave together the most pressing issues faced by today's young, not so young, renters and parental homeowners, and place these stories in a wider narrative that affects us all. I have dug out and presented what I believe are the most critical solutions that I've called for neglected debates to be reopened, most importantly on land and credit. I wrote this book while living and working in Sheffield. Consequently, some of the case studies here are from my hometown, but the outlook is national and the material spans the length and breadth of the country. Many of the trends are found to a varying degree in other Western countries. My hope for Generation Rent is that we can break free from the simplistic narratives that dominate the current debate about housing. I want us to leave behind tired binary arguments like boost regulation versus cut red tape, build more homes v control immigration, and help people get on the ladder v tell them to stop buying avocado toast. Instead, I want to start talking about what really drives our current shameful situation. I don't profess to have all the answers, but if this book can at least start to change the national conversation on housing, I will consider it a success. Well, it is a success. Fantastic. I've a hard copy on order. I've been reading it on my Kindle on my phone. I'm going to read the last few chapters today. But let's just take the avocado toast point. This is my Yahoo channel, and if I just go to my publications here, some of these are public, some of them are not. Some of them are investments prospectuses, and others are actually open discussions. This one, Sadiq's Paul Doors Barn, Westbury Printers, Friary Park. We will open that one, and we will open this one. So here we go. They have been published, but this is the way that I go about opening Lothmiles. I've got Lothmiles here. I read. Now, Lothmiles is an idea based on community tokens and hours, like Ithaca hours, community currencies, which is part of the work of Bernard Laitier. Now, this was an open source document that I produced for Placemaking Basics. I'm a property developer, and I am interested in building affordable homes, and have inserted myself into various debates, not least the one on the former Telegraph printing works site owned by Richard Desmond on the Isle of Dogs. Lothmiles and Placemaking Basics were a series of ideas I started working on because I was asked to give a talk on the real estate networking platform about major regeneration, a subject of which I know a small amount about from my experience of being a London Docklands pioneer going back to the late 1980s. So all I want to do on this Lothmiles thing, I'll put the description, the link in the description, but there's a letter I wrote to Richard Desmond about West Ferry Printworks when all that kicked off, but talks about sweat equity, putting hours into it, collective things. So now Pocket Living are a housing association that are not for profit but for profit, in my opinion. So here we go. First home stories meet Narada and Hannah, and in their own, this is interesting, buying a home doesn't mean giving up avocado toast and coffees for the foreseeable future. In this blog series, we get all the insight from recent buyers on how they managed to get on the property ladder. Now, Pocket Living have got a mortgage calculator, a help to buy, a shared ownership thing. They've recently built a 25-story modular block in Croydon, which I've studied. It was built for them for something called Elements Europe. It's a European modular builder. Now, I'm not going to go into all of that. You can find that on my various blogs, like the Real Estate Land and Development blog, for instance. This blog here. So this is a blog in June, 3rd of June 2020, Lothmiles. About Lothmiles. This is J.K. Rowling saying where she wrote Harry Potter. That's Clapham Junction. I used to live around the corner from there myself. I think probably at the same sort of time that J.K. Rowling did. This is a brilliant documentary called Where the Houses Used to Be, and it's well worth watching, from 1971, and talking about the previous system built disasters. Adam Curtis made a brilliant documentary about that as well. But this is the Real RLD blog, and this is me, RLD Limited. This is Moduloft, which is our new housing company. This was an article that appeared in the Property Week. I used to be fairly well known in the property market in Docklands. David Parsley used to be the business editor of the Express, but he really interviewed me 25 years after the first interview, when he was a cover reporter on Property Week or Chartwell Weekly back in the day. That was this article here, which was in 1995, I think. Yeah, 1995. But you can read all about, my deeds, misdeeds, and general sort of lifetime or professional lifetime in property. And you can also read my other blog, which is this one here, Not the Grove Street Journal, which is actually quite a radical blog. We were talking about Henry George earlier, and I was saying about being a distributivist and a prudentite. There's another site I can show you here. I almost finished a a novel which I've been writing called Conquest of Dough, and that's a one on Conquest of Bread, which is a famous book by Peter Kropotkin, who's quite a famous anarchist. Proudhon's a famous anarchist, and I'm a not famous anarchist, a philosophical anarchist. I don't go around wearing a black balaclava and chucking bombs at that place, which is the bad name that anarchism is given by various narratives, which frankly haven't read their Immanuel Kant, who describes anarchy as a form of government, which is basically a rule of law without violence. A republic is a rule of law with violence. I have a t-shirt site which has that on a t-shirt. Introduction, what, why, and how, a note on scads and conspiracies. Whenever one starts tackling the issue of credit creation, credit misallocation, etc., how it applies to the housing market and so forth, one is always a step away from a rabbit hole, which can be quite a discombobulating experience. Now, let's just go back to this blog here, because as I was saying that, there was something I want to say. That yes, this is a blog I did on the 1st of August. That's Jimi Hendrix, Castles in the Sand. Right, so this is the blog which I did on the RRB website, which is kind of a summary of where I got to at the beginning of August with Modulov Finance, the partners, Place Ladywell, and the London School of Economics. There's a couple of excellent documentaries, Foreign Money Lessons from a Site Visit to Greenwich Peninsula. This is a very interesting scheme, a self-build scheme in Lewisham. That's the talk I gave on major regeneration, etc. All these things are all working on and alluding to the same things which Chloe has tackled in this excellent book. So just to wrap up, Generation Rent, why you can't buy a home or even rent a good one. It's out from the 5th of August. Okay, so you can buy it now. I encourage you to do that. Get the Kindle copy and start reading it, and get a hard copy and give it to your grandparents, your parents, your MP. Go to your local library and ask them to get it in for you. Get this on the shelves of local libraries. This is a very important book. I cannot stress enough that Chloe does get it. Now, in terms of how we solve this problem, it may well be that Chloe and I don't absolutely see eye to eye on that, but what we do agree on is that there is a problem and how that problem has come about, that a major component of that problem is the availability of credit, and credit misallocation, which is at the heart of a lot of problems which we have in modern political economy. Now, Chloe gets that. Not many people do. And Chloe is to be congratulated both on delivering a very concise, a beautifully written, a very well presented narrative story that uses real life experiences and talking to real people about how this has affected them. One of the things I pointed out to my friend Ranjan Kumaran yesterday was that I've been reading a lot of very dry academic papers on these same subjects, and what is very clear is that people are treated as statistics. People are atomized into a mathematical expression in some sort of mathematical identity, which completely disavows the human identity and personality of this problem. And this problem is not going away. It does require solutions. I think Boris Johnson and Robert Jenrick are to be congratulated on tackling it. If you look at some of the people they've been upsetting, I'm glad those people are upset. And what they really need to do is stop pointing the finger the other way and look inside and take a good look at their own investment in a system and contribution to a system which is no longer fit for purpose. Generation rent, why you can't buy a home or even rent a good one. Buy it now. It really will repay the reading.